Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. A couple days ago, we posted a part 1 of this, a tier list for the new legendary creatures from March of the Machine. So if you haven't seen part 1, you should probably watch that before you watch this. Before we get into part 2 though, a couple things that I thought I should touch on. So one, I misread Galta. It's a little better than I thought. So I still have no interest in playing it. I'll move it to the top of C though. Granted though, I haven't really been keeping this too stacked correctly. And then Elenda and Azor, I originally had in top of B and I moved it to S because the more I thought about it, the more I thought it seems really fun, even though I don't think it's actually like crazy strong. It definitely seems fun. I'm probably not going to build it in paper because it's too similar to my Quasar deck that I have in paper. But if this card does make it onto Magic Online, which it might not because it's from one of the pre-cons, but if it does, I will probably play it in our Magic Online series. First episode of that comes out in a couple weeks, so make sure to subscribe. And then if you also want to see a cool Quasar deck in action, Chris played it on the first episode of our Spell Table series, which came out a couple days ago, so you can go check that out. Without further ado, let's finish up this tier list. All right, we got Inga and Asika. So this is for 2 green, blue, human god, 4/4. Creatures you control have vigilance and tap to add 1 mana of any color. Spend this mana only to cast creature spells. And then whenever you cast a creature spell, if 3 or more mana from creatures was spent to cast it, draw a card. So this is gonna be kind of a Simic option to Elf Ball. So play a bunch of mana dorks, which tend to be elves, which is where the name comes from. And then that's going to feed into paying for more of them. And because a lot of those cards can tap for multiple mana, it's pretty easy to activate the second part to draw cards and keep it going. So especially if you have some kind of haste enabler, or this goes berserk with intruder alarm. So every time you play a creature, you untap all of your creatures, just go completely insane. I mean, that's not like an infinite mana combo, but that's next to infinite. You'd be able to basically draw out your entire hand, or your entire deck, I should say. And you don't necessarily have to play it exactly that way because, I mean, it does just turn your other creatures into mana dorks. So it does allow you to play things outside of mana dorks. If you just want to get access to this first ability, and then that could matter because it also gives your creatures vigilance, so that it can incentivize for attacking. The problem I have with Elf Ball is you just do a lot of stuff and then you just wait for your overrun effect before you win the game. This at least lets you start contributing to combat and damage a little earlier. This is really strong. I used to have a Elf Ball deck and it's kind of just annoying to play and people don't like playing against it. So I'm going to put it in B because of it's not that fun to play against and people don't like it, but it definitely is very powerful. All right, we have Jin Gataxius. So for 3 blue, Phyrexian Praetor, 5/5 with Ward 2, and then whenever you cast a non-creature spell with mana value 3 or greater, draw a card. And then for 3 and a blue, exile it, then return it to the battlefield transformed under its owner's control. Activate only as a sorcery and only if you have 7 or more cards in hand. And it flips into the Great Synthesis, which is a saga. The first chapter says, draw cards equal to the number of cards in your hand. You have no maximum hand size for as long as you control the Great Synthesis. Chapter 2, return all non-Phyrexian creatures to their owner's hand. Chapter 3, you may cast any number of spells from your hand without paying their mana cost, then exile it and return it to the battlefield as Jin Gataxius. So I think as far as like spell slinger commanders go, this is pretty fair. I mean, the fact that every time you do cast one of these higher mana spells, you're gonna get to keep refilling your hand. But this just seems so incredibly slow. I don't think you're gonna be able to get it to the backside all that often. And even if you do, I don't think the backside is really that strong. If you get a bunch of cards out that reduce the cost of your instances and sorceries, that does make it a lot better, obviously. As far as Spellslinger goes, this is not very good. There are just so many better instant and sorcery Spellslinger kind of decks out there, and I don't think you're going to be able to flip this very consistently. So we're actually going to put that in C. I don't think it's great. All right, next up we have Kasla the Broken Halo. So for 3 blue, red, white, 5/4 Angel Ally. This is one of the face commanders from one of the new precons. It has Convoke, so your creatures can help cast this spell. And then it has Flying, Vigilance, Haste, and then whenever you cast another spell with convoke, scry 2, then draw a card. So it's a convoke matters commander. So this is a really minor nitpicky thing, but the fact that it's an ally and it doesn't care about allies is really weird to me, because that's part of what allies do traditionally, but that's neither here nor there. But the art is awesome. This is one of my favorite arts from the set. I kind of like this precon. I kind of want to get this precon because Jeskai's a cool color combination, and I don't have a Jeskai deck anymore. So this seems like a really fun way. The card advantage is insane. Scry 2, then draw. It's going to help you dig real deep into your deck and help you find the answers you need. And then Convoke is like deceptively very powerful. I think if you have a bunch of Convoke spells flying around in your playgroup, I think everyone's aware that it's way better than people give it credit for, but it's really, really sweet. I love this card. I love the idea on caring about Convoke, which is something that, you know, if I had to make a Convoke Matters commander, I don't know what I would do, but this seems like just a really sweet option. We're going to put that in A. I think it's awesome. Next up, we have Catilda and Lier. So this is a team up from Innistrad. This is for green, white, blue. It's a 3/3 human. Whenever you cast a human spell, target instant or sorcery card in your graveyard gains flashback until end of turn. The flashback cost is equal to its mana cost. I actually don't necessarily care for this. I mean, you could just be running it for value in a Bant Humans tribal deck, either as the commander or in the 99, right? Because you're going to have instants and sorceries in that deck anyways. You're going to have your Cultivates, your Rampant Growth, your counter spells, your whatever. So being able to get those again is pretty sweet. But the fact that it only gains that flashback till end of turn, and then your humans are, you know, let's say 1 to 3 mana, I feel like you're gonna have to ramp a lot before this actually becomes like practical to use. And even then, if you're playing humans, there are obviously tons of great humans in these colors, but I just feel like this is not a very exciting way to play humans, because it's like it cares about instants and sorceries, but it's in the shell of a creature deck. So getting that balance right seems quite challenging. I think it's a cool design space, but I think it's deceptive. I want to put it in C. I don't doubt that there is a powerful version of this deck that you could build, but I think it's a trick. Next, we have Kogla and Yardo, for 2 red, green, so 6 mana. It's a 7/7 ape dinosaur turtle. This makes no sense. When it enters the battlefield, choose one. It gains trample and haste until end of turn, or it fights target creature you don't control. And as a 7/7, that's going to kill almost anything. And then for 2 red-green, discard it, destroy up to 1 target artifact or enchantment, shuffle it into your library or graveyard, then draw a card. So obviously that discard ability doesn't really work if this is your commander. So I think it's pretty easy to say that this is like, if you're playing like a Gruul Stompy kind of deck, this card is really good in the 99, because it's either going to be a really heavy hitter or it's going to remove something problematic on the board. And then if you really, really don't need it, then you can get rid of it and blow up an artifact or enchantment. I think as removal, this card is sweet in the 99, but as an actual commander, it doesn't really work. In order to get that last ability for the destroy artifact or enchantment, you're gonna have to get it into your hand, which isn't impossible to do, but it's just an extra hoop on a 6 mana commander. Yeah, so I don't think this is good as a commander. I think as a 99, it's really cool, but no, we're not gonna run that as a commander, no. Next we have Kroxa and Knuros. For 3 red, white, black, it's a 6/6 Elder Giant Dog. With Vigilance, Menace, and Lifelink, when it enters the battlefield or attacks, you may exile 5 cards from your graveyard. When you do, return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. This actually seems like a really fun reanimation build. I haven't put a lot of thought into this beforehand, but I don't know of a like go-to reanimator commander in this color combination. So this actually seems really, really cool, really flavorful, and Theros is really sweet. It's also just a really efficient creature too, like 6 mana, 6/6, Vigilance, Menace, Lifelink. It seems really, really good. So even if you don't have any great hits in your graveyard, you're just having one of those kind of games, you know, it happens. Even then, it's going to be a really awesome attacker. So I think it's really sweet. I think if you're playing Reanimator, and that's the color combination you want to go, I think that's going to be your go-to from now on. We're going to put that in A. Okay, next we have Moira and Tashar. This is for 3 white, black, 4/5 Phyrexian Spirit Bird with flying. Whenever you cast a historic spell, return target non-land permanent card from your graveyard to the battlefield. It gains haste, exile it at the beginning of the next end step. If it would leave the battlefield, exile it instead of putting it anywhere else. artifacts, legendaries, and sagas are historic. Again, with the Reanimator, this is a like pretty cool option in this color combination, but there are so many ways in these colors to keep those creatures around for longer than the one turn. So there is a version of this that could be really cool where you're just running things that have really good enter the battlefield effects, leave the battlefield effects. So there is a build of this that's cool, but again, in these colors, they're just better Reanimator commanders. We're going to put it in B. I don't think it's bad, but it's like, why play this over something else? I'm not sure. Cool art though. All right, next up we have Omnath, Locust of All. For one of each color, except the black is Phyrexian. It's a 4/4 Phyrexian elemental. If you would lose unspent mana, that mana becomes black instead. At the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, look at the top card of your library. You may reveal that card if it has 3 or more colors, mana symbols in its mana cost. If you do, add 3 mana in any combination of colors and put it into your hand. If you don't, reveal it and put it into your hand. So this reminds me a lot of Niv Mizzet Reborn, except it's also a callback to like the original Omnath, which is pretty cool. I don't know what I would expect from a 5-color Omnath. And really, I think it actually is pretty cool that all of the Omnaths do something kind of different. So that's pretty cool. I think this is actually really, really sweet. I've never built an Omnath deck, so I don't know how like the average person necessarily feels about this. Like if you have an Omnath deck or you're a big fan of Omnath, I don't necessarily know how those people feel about this card. So let me know in the comments if you're one of those people where you would put this on the tier list. But the fact that it kind of feels like it probably plays similarly to Niv Mizzet Reborn seems really strong. I'm going to put it in A. It seems really cool. I could see myself maybe building it for the Magic Online series at some point. Next up we have Orthion, Hero of Lavabring. For 3 and a red, it's a 3/3 human soldier. Pay 1 and a red, tap it, create a token that's a copy of another target creature you control. It gains haste, sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step, activate only as a sorcery. So that's basically the backside of Reflections of Kiki Jiki, which is an all-star in standard right now. And then for 6 red, so 9 total mana, tap it, create 5 tokens that are copies of another target creature you control. They gain haste, sacrifice them at the beginning of the next end step, only activate as a sorcery. I think the main problem with this is really, really mana intensive. And then you only can activate it as a sorcery. And then this guy doesn't have haste. It's not like you can even wait a couple turns so you have the extra mana and then play it out and do it right away. You can't. That's not an option. I think that this is going to be an all-star in certain decks, but otherwise, I don't think that this is necessarily going to be a great commander unless you have like a bunch of like, when something dies, do this. Then that seems pretty good, but I feel like there's just too much work around. It's really mana intensive. I think they could have actually gone a little farther with this. I know we like to complain about power creep lately, but I think this one probably could have been, they could have taken it a little farther. I'm gonna put it in D. There's just, next we have Pelukaranos Reborn. For green, it's a 4/5 Hydra with reach. That by itself, that is so above the curve. I'm gonna be, mono green right now in standard. Not very good, but if this card doesn't see play, I'm going to be real surprised just because that is so efficient. But for 6 and a Phyrexian white mana, you can transform it only as a sorcery, and it transforms into Pelukaranos, Engine of Ruin, which is a 6/6 with reach and lifelink. And then it's kind of like Wormcoil Engine. When it dies, when it or another non-token Hydra you control dies, create a 3/3 green and white Phyrexian Hydra creature token with reach and a 3/3 green and white Phyrexian Hydra creature token with lifelink. And me, as a go hard for Hydras, I think this is sick. And this also gives you another option for Hydra Tribal getting to play white. I don't know off the top of my head of any like white Hydras that you'd care to play, but this seems really cool. And again, a 3 mana 4/5 with reach is so above the curve that even if you're just playing a Selesnya stompy kind of deck, I feel like it could go in there just as a good creature, good efficient creature. But if you are going to play it as a commander, I think the right way to do it is to get it to that backside and play it as a Hydra commander, in which case it's kind of like, I don't know, you could say it's like 9 mana commander. That seems kind of ridiculous if you want to flip it right away. So I don't know. I don't actually think it's very good, but it is really cool. I guess B. There's an argument to put it at C though. But look at that art. That's so cool. All right, next up we have Kentorius Loremaster. This guy is from Strixhaven. So for 3 red, white, 3/5 elephant cleric with vigilance. At the beginning of your end step, exile target non-creature, non-land card from your graveyard and create a 3/2 red and white spirit creature token. And then for 1 red, white, sacrifice a spirit, choose target card exiled with it. You may cast that card this turn without paying its mana cost. If that spell would be put into a graveyard, put it onto the bottom of its owner's library instead. This seems pretty cool, actually. You could kind of think of it as like spirit, tribal, sacrifice, mill, spell slinger. Like there's a couple different ways and a couple different like pieces of different archetypes that you could take to make this deck pretty dang cool. And I always like it when, this is a huge compliment I have of Strixhaven in general. I know a lot of people have mixed feelings about Strixhaven, but what I really like about it specifically is it gave red-white something to do other than combat. So, you know, we have Osgir, which was from the pre-con, and that's one of my favorite commander decks, and I don't like this color combination, so that says something. And this is like a kind of weird spell slinger kind of option, and the fact that it puts those spells back into your library to potentially use them again later, that is pretty dang cool. I actually really like this card. I don't think it's actually very strong as far as spell slinger goes, but to specifically put it in this color combination, I think opens it up to some really cool opportunities. We'll go ahead and put that in A. Okay, next we have Wrinkle and Torbrand. So for 1 black, black, red, red, 3/4 fairy dwarf with flying, first strike, haste, and then when it deals combat damage to a player or battle, choose any number. Each player creates a treasure token. Each player sacrifices a creature. If a source would deal damage to a player or battle this turn, it deals that much damage +2 instead. I think this card is pretty decent. I don't know how good of a commander it is. The fact that it is going to kind of control the board, though, it's going to give you a little extra mana when you need it. If you're trying to get some pressure off your back, that's a way to do it, because you're going to give each player a treasure token. But you're also just going to control the board well. You're going to be able to deal damage. You're going to be able to make people sacrifice their creatures. And if this is your commander, you have that in mind, so that you can maybe be playing a bunch of stuff that makes tokens, so you can just sacrifice a token that you don't care about. My concern is that it is 5 mana, and it's specifically 2 black and 2 red. Now in Commander, I think we are at a point where basically no matter what color combination you're playing, your mana fixing actually is probably pretty good. And there are ways to optimize it. But I think if you're the average player and you don't want to spend a ton of money on fetches and good duels and the really, really good mana rocks, I don't know. I see that this could be pretty cool, could be pretty fun. I'm gonna have to put it in B for right now, I think, just because I think the ceiling is relatively low, but the fact that it is just a good way to control the board a little bit seems pretty cool. All right, we have another Kaladesh team up. We have Rashmi and the stupid monkey Ragavan himself. So for 1 and Timur, it's a 2/4 elf monkey. Okay, can we stop right now? I hate that these team ups are just the creature type of both characters. It's not like it's one creature, it's 2 separate creatures. I talked about this in a video where I was just evaluating like the Thalia Get Rog monster, and it was like, okay, it would make more sense if this was like some kind of version of partner with. That would make way more sense. Or like make like a partner that only works in this setting. There were other ways to do it than this, and this is why. This is the main reason why I think it's ridiculous, but then the cards wouldn't work the way that they work. So let's just continue. It is what it is. I do still love these. Don't think I'm trashing them. But whenever you cast your first spell during each of your turns, exile the top card of target opponent's library and create a treasure token. Then you may cast the exiled card without paying its mana cost if it's a spell with mana value less than the number of artifacts you control. If you don't cast it this way, you may cast it this turn. I actually really like the original Rashmi from Kaladesh. I think it's a card that I don't get to play as much as I want to, because I don't play Simic as much as a lot of other players do. And then I have a huge disdain for Ragavan because of what he's done to Modern. So mixed feelings on this one for me, but it is a really cool effect. I love getting to play with other people's cards. Like I mentioned in the last video that part one of this, that I love Atali, like the original Atali, because it plays other cards, and I just think that's a really fun, chaotic thing to do in a game of Magic, especially in Commander, where there's so much high variance anyways, because it's a 100-card singleton format, so there's so much variance, and then everyone has multiple decks, so you're going to be playing with different decks all the time, and there's just going to be so many weird things that you can do with that, so anything that lets you do that is really fun, so I like this card. I think I'm gonna build it. Well, okay, so again, it's from one of the pre-con, so I don't know if it's gonna make it on a Magic Online, and I think that's where I would want to build it, is because this seems like potentially problematic to play in paper, just because like touching other people's cards sometimes makes people uncomfortable. We'll put it in A. If it makes it on a Magic Online, I might build it. Again, if you need my clarification for how my tier system works, you should have watched part 1 by now. All right, this one is so cool. This is Rona, Herald of Invasion for 1 in a blue. It's a 2/3 human wizard. Whenever you cast a legendary spell, untap it, and you can tap it to loot, and then you can pay 5 and a Phyrexian black to transform it, only as a sorcery, and transforms into Rona Tolarian Obliterator, which is a 5/5 Phyrexian wizard with trample. Whenever a source deals damage to Rona, that source's controller exiles a card from their hand at random. If it's a land card, you may put it onto the battlefield under your control, otherwise you may cast it without paying its mana cost. And for a 5/5 with trample, there's going to be someone on the battlefield that you're going to be able to do that too. Okay, I just said that I like playing with other people's cards. That goes here too. This is this is so cool. I love it. And the fact that you're going to be able to also have card advantage. This is only a 2-mana commander, so you're going to get it down on maybe turn 2, turn 3. You're going to be able to start getting that card advantage and start looting. And then when it's ready to flip, there's you're going to be able to just get the backside and play other people's cards. This just seems so freaking fun. A tier as well for that one. Okay, next we have Saint Traft and Rem Carolus for blue, red, white. It's a 3/4 Spirit Human. When it becomes tapped, create a 1/1 red human token. If it's the first time this ability resolves this turn. If it's the second time, create a 1/1 blue spirit creature token with flying. And if it's the third time, create a 4/4 white angel creature token with flying. Whenever you cast a spell that has Convoke, untap it. So this is the backup commander in that Convoke one. With Convoke, that's how you do the Convoke, is you tap your creatures to help pay for them. They're kind of like mana dorks. So that's how you're going to be able to get this. I think you're actually probably, if you have like a handful of Convoke cards in your hand that you're going to be able to have access to, I think you're consistently going to be able to untap it and probably get to that angel. You're probably going to get that a decent amount of the time. I don't like this one as much as the other Convoke commander, but in the 99, obviously this is amazing in that deck. But I think if you were playing Convoke, it's not as good, but it's still pretty cool. I'm gonna put it in C. I think it's great for the 99, but as a commander, it's pretty meh. So by that logic, I guess it's C. Okay, next we have Chalet and Halar for 1 red, green, white, 3/3 angel elf with flying and vigilance. And then whenever 1 or more +1/+1 counters are put on a creature you control, it deals that much damage to target opponent. Okay, so 2 things to note. 1, I don't know how she got up there. Number 2, this has combo written all over it. I don't know off the top of my head what the best way to do this was. Oh, I guess it probably goes with All Will Be One, that red enchantment from the last set. I don't remember the exact wording. But anyways, this seems like a crazy way to just deal a ton of damage to your opponents really quick. I think if you're playing these colors with +1/+1 counters, this is probably one of the cooler commanders that you could play. The other +1/+1 commander in these colors that we talked about, we put in B, and I think this is cooler, so I guess just based on that, we'll put it in A. I didn't know how I was going to feel about this set going in, but we have a lot of A's and a lot of B's, so overall, pretty positive about this set. Okay, next we have Sheoldred. So for 3 black, Phyrexian Praetor, that's a 4/5 with Menace. When she enters the battlefield, each opponent sacrifices a non-token creature or planeswalker. Then you can pay 4 and a black, exile it, and return it transformed only as a sorcery, and only if an opponent has 8 or more cards in their graveyard. And it transforms into the True Scriptures, which is a saga. Chapter 1, for each opponent, destroy up to 1 target creature or planeswalker that player controls. Chapter 2, each opponent discards 3 cards, then mills 3 cards. And then Chapter 3, put all creature cards from all graveyards onto the battlefield under your control, and then flip it back to Sheoldred. So I actually like this card because the backside on that last chapter, it's kind of a callback to like the original Sheoldred, which is pretty cool. But I will say that this one is really hard to flip compared to a lot of the other Praetors and a lot of these other flip cards. This is one of the harder ones to do because you have to wait for your opponents to have 8 or more cards in their graveyard. Now, you could be playing a mill deck, or you could just be playing a lot of removal, but if you're in mono black, that does limit you at least a little bit. Now, granted, you know, she's gonna come down and immediately each player's gonna sacrifice a non-token, so that's at least one card that you're putting in each player's graveyard. But for 5 mana, that's not the best. And then it's just a 4/5 with Menace that's sitting around prone to removal because it has no way to protect itself until you do get to that 5 mana and someone has 8 or more cards to get to the backside. Now, I think if you can get to the backside, I think it's incredibly powerful, but I don't think that that's going to be very realistic. If you're playing a mill deck, specifically if you're playing like Dimir Mill, I think this is going to be really, really good in that kind of deck, because then you're going to be able to get that ability to flip it a lot more consistently, and then you're going to also just have way more targets with that last chapter. But I think if you're specifically running Sheoldred as the commander, it's not very good. So I guess we're going to say C. Great in the 99 of some decks, but a pretty mid commander. All right, next up we have Sadar, Jabari, and Zalfir for 1 white, blue, black, 4/3 human knight. This is another one of the face commanders. It has Eminence, which is everyone's favorite keyword. Whenever you attack with 1 or more knights, if it is in the command zone or on the battlefield, draw a card, then discard a card. As far as Eminence abilities goes, that's pretty tame and pretty inoffensive. It has flying and first strike, and then whenever it deals combat damage to a player, return target knight creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. We've seen Knight Tribal before, but I think that this is probably a lot better than a lot of the other ones we've seen. I think it's weird that we don't have red here, because if I remember right, a lot of the Knight support we got, like in Eldraine, I think red was one of the colors that it supported. Maybe I'm wrong, but so I think not having red is like kind of a bummer. But I think if you're wanting to play Knight Tribal, this probably really is your best option, because that Eminence ability, even though this is like pretty tame by all standards compared to the other cards with Eminence, it's still really good. It's still going to give you card advantage, and it is incentivizes attacking, which I like. One of my main complaints about Commander is that sometimes the games take too long because people don't want to attack. So if your cards work better when you attack, and it says do it anyway. So I think this card's pretty cool. We're going to go ahead and put this in B. I have no interest in playing Knight Tribal, but I think if you're going to play Knight Tribal, that's the way to do it. Next up, we have Slimefoot and Squee. So for black, red, green, 3/3 fungus goblin, whenever it enters the battlefield or attacks, create a 1/1 green sapperling creature token. And you can pay 1 black, red, green, sacrifice the sapperling, return it and up to 1 other target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield, activate only as a sorcery. This is another one of those that I think is more designed for constructed, or if you like are playing it in the 99 of like a sapperling deck. It seems like there is a way to make this really cool, but you're going to want to consistently find ways to put Slimefoot and Squee into your graveyard on purpose. So having sacrifice outlets on board, or having spells that say at an additional cost sacrifice a creature, stuff like that to consistently get it into your graveyard. And I don't think that that's actually probably that problematic in Commander, because then if someone like goes to exile your graveyard, then at least you can just move it back to the command zone. So it's not that big of a deal if you lose it. So really, I think it kind of just turns into a Jund Reanimator deck, but it does require a decent amount of setup. If you spend the early turns doing that setup, it's only a 3 mana commander. So I think this is actually pretty decent. I think if you're going to play Jund Reanimator, this is pretty decent. I don't think it's as powerful because it requires that setup, so we'll put it in C, but I think it's definitely a decent option if you're wanting to play a sacrifice or / reanimator deck in that color combination. Next up, we have Sarok and Goreclaw. So for 4 green, it's a 6/5 human bear. It has trample. Other creatures you control have trample. And whenever another non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on it. It gains haste until end of turn. This is just green, big, scary creatures, which is, you know, it's a tried and true method. Now, I will say that there are so many good, like mono green, stompy kind of commanders that, you know, is this necessarily the best one? I don't know, but the fact that it is going to give your other creatures trample, is going to give your creatures haste if this is already in play, that makes it really effective in combat. So I think this is one of those cards that, like, whether it's at your commander or it's just in the 99, I think it's going to be really, really good. Again, I don't actually think it's the best mono green commander by any means, so I think we're going to put it in C, as in, like, you need a specific reason to play this over some of the other mono green commanders. But it is pretty good. It would get the job done. Oh, I put it in B. Yeah, We'll say that. All right, next up we have Thalia and the Get Rog monster. So for 1 white, black, green, 4/4 human frog horror with first strike and death touch, you may play an additional land on each of your turns. Creatures and non-basic lands your opponents control enter the battlefield tapped, and whenever it attacks, sacrifice a creature or land, then draw a card. I've talked about this card in a couple other videos at this point. This is my favorite one of the team-ups. It's so fun. I'm very, very fond of Shadows over Innistrad, which obviously this is a callback to 2 cards from Shadows over Innistrad. That's when I started playing Magic, so I'm very nostalgic about that set. And this is, I think, a great commander if you are just playing like a really good land combat. I don't know what the best way to build this as a commander is, but I have a human, in Abzan human tribal deck. This is definitely going to go in there. I think there's argument that I probably could have it as the commander of that deck, but I probably won't. I'll probably just put it in the 99. But this is my favorite of the team ups. It's just an incredibly powerful card. Beautiful. It's amazing. It gives me pure joy, mostly for nostalgia. As a commander, I actually think it is pretty good. I think we're gonna have to put it in A, because I think if you're playing these colors, why would you not play this card, at least in the 99? And then I think if you do build around it properly, I think it is a really strong commander. All right, next up we have Urbrask. For some reason, the quality on this one isn't as good as some of the other ones, so thanks, Gryfall. So this is Urbrask. So for 2 red, it's a 4/4 for Phyrexian Praetor with first strike. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, it deals 1 damage to target opponent, add red. And then for red, you may exile it and return it to the backside only as a sorcery, and only if you've cast 3 or more instants of sorceries this turn. And it turns into the Great Work, which is a saga. For chapter 1, it deals 3 damage to target opponent and each creature they control. Chapter 2, create 3 treasure tokens. And chapter 3, until end of turn, you may cast instant or sorcery spells from your graveyard. If you cast an instant or sorcery spell this way, exile it instead, and then return it back to the front side. This card is really good. This is probably the best Urbrask. The other 2 are like, okay, but they're not great commanders by any means. This one, I could see. If you're going to play red Spellslinger, this is probably just the best option because it's going to help you storm off really, really quick. I also just misread it. The Great Work on that last chapter, you can play instants and sorceries from any graveyard, which is why that treasure token is so important, is because you have to spend the mana, right? So if you're playing against, you're playing this as your commander, it's a mono red deck, but you really want the blue instant or sorcery that's in another player's graveyard, well, these treasure tokens will help you get there. So I misread that. I thought I should fix that real quick. So this card is awesome. And as far as flipping the Praetors goes to their Saga side, this is maybe the easiest one. This is awesome. If you're going to play red Spellslinger, I think this is the one you got to go with. It's at least up there with like Bergie, the one from Kaldheim, I think is what she's called. I think this is right up there with her. So we're going to go ahead and put that in A. That's awesome. If you're going to play mono red Spellslinger, that seems like maybe the new go-to. All right, we only have 4 left. I am so tired and I'm losing my voice. So Vorinclex for 3 green is a 6/6 Phyrexian Praetor with Trample and Reach. When it enters the battlefield, search your library for up to 2 forest cards, reveal them, put them into your hand, then shuffle. And then for 6 green, exile it and return to the battlefield transformed under its owner's control. Activate only as a sorcery and it transforms into the Saga, the Grand Evolution. Chapter 1, mill 10 cards, put up to 2 target creature cards from among the milled cards onto the battlefield. Chapter 2, distribute 7 +1/+1 counters among any number of target creatures you control. And then chapter 3, until end of turn, creatures you control gain, pay 1. This creature fights a target creature you don't control, and then you exile it and flip it back to Vorinclex's side. So the fact that it's tutor for any forest, that's pretty good. So you can grab your dual lands and stuff, but it does put them in your hand. It's not actually ramping you. It's not putting them onto the battlefield. Obviously, if you are grabbing dual lands with it, that's really good. But if you're playing this in mono green, that probably doesn't matter. You could probably just grab basic forests. It is 8 mana to flip it, but that is the only requirement, which is nice to some of the other ones, which is like pay this decently high mana value and then also do another thing. So there is that, but 8 mana is a lot to ask for. And then I think the backside just isn't as strong as the other ones. I think if there are decks, obviously, where you would want to play this, if you are playing a bunch of really good value creatures that, just get 2 from the top 10 of your library is pretty decent, and you're gonna make your creatures bigger, and then the last chapter is basically removal in a mono green deck. Or if you're playing this in the 99, just mill 10 is pretty dang good. Like if you're playing like Muldrotha or something. Mill 10 is pretty good because almost anything that you mill, you're just going to get back later, or to use for value. Or if you're playing something that has a deck that has a lot of delve or whatever, there are ways to make this good. But I do think that this is probably just 2 mana intensive. I think I have to put this in C along here with Shieldred. Relatively hard to flip, and then I don't know if it's necessarily worth it. Next we have Yargle and Multani, which is for 3 black, black, green, so 6 mana total. It's an 18/6 Frog Spirit Elemental, and that's it. Though it does have some of the best flavor text of any other Magic card I've ever seen in my life. I don't know what the best way to play this is. There are I saw a quick video that MTG Goldfish did where there's a 2-card combo with this in Standard that you basically just fling it at your opponent and win the game that way, which is pretty funny. That is an option. You can just fling it at your opponents, but I think a fun, interesting way to play it would be like Voltron, do like a Voltron build of it. Seems pretty good because honestly, a 6 mana 18/6 is pretty good. You find a way to give it trample, it's going to be killing people with commander damage really, really quick. The fact that it only has 6 toughness, I think there is an argument that it probably dies in combat really easy. This really is just like upgraded version of the original Yargle, because I think it's only 1 mana more than the original Yargle if I remember right. And it's a much bigger hitter, and now you have access to green cards, so you can play cards like Rancor and whatnot. So I think that this is pretty fun. I think if you're going to play this color combination, you want to go Voltron or you want to fling it at your opponents or something like that, it's pretty funny, just like the original Yargle. It's pretty funny. So I'm going to put it in, I guess, B, because I don't think it's actually good, but it is really funny. And now we'll do A. We'll do A. I like it too much. All right, next up we have Zamone and Dina. So for black, green, blue, it's a 3/4 human dryad. Whenever you draw your second card each turn, target opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. And then you can tap it, sacrifice another creature, draw a card. You may put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield tapped. If you control 8 or more lands, repeat the process once. Draw extra cards, sacrifice creatures to draw more cards, get a bunch of lands. It's just a normal Simic card, except it is draining your opponents and you do have to sacrifice creatures. That's where the black comes from, because the original Dina is the witch from Strixhaven. I think there is a way to make this pretty good because green, blue are kind of like really good token colors. So you're going to have tons of sacrifice fodder for that second ability. And the fact that it's only 3 mana, you're going to be able to get this down pretty quick. You're going to be drawing extra cards all the time if you're playing blue. Get Rhystic Study down, or you're playing black, you could play Phyrexian Arena if you really wanted to. You're going to be doing that a lot. You're going to be draining the table. You're going to be gaining life, which is going to help you stabilize, because I think this is a good card to have life gain attached to it, because you're going to get out of hand relatively quick, I think. I think this is really cool. This, again, it really just feels like a Simic commander with a splash of black, so it's kind of weird, but I kind of like it. I guess we'll put it in A. It's pretty cool. All right, finally, we have the last one. This is Zurgo and Ojutai. So for 2 blue, red, white, 4/4 orc dragon with flying and haste. It has hexproof as long as it entered the battlefield this turn, which is nice. People can't just be like, kill your commander before you do anything with it. So whenever 1 or more dragons you control deals combat damage to a player or battle, look at the top 3 cards of your library, put 1 of them in your hand, and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. You may return 1 of those dragons to its owner's hand. The real upside of this card is that this is the first really good option in this color combination if you want to build Dragon Tribal. Dragon Tribal is one of the most common ways to build commander decks because people love dragons, because dragons are awesome, and this is a fantasy game, so might as well. But I think if you're playing these colors, this is now the best option because it's gonna give you card advantage. It has a little bit of built-in protection. It's going to be able to get in damage right away. If you have dragons with good enter or leave the battlefield effects, it's going to give you the opportunity to put them back in your hand. Again, it's card advantage. Yeah, I think if you're playing Dragon Tribal and you want to play it in this color combination, this is your new go-to. I'm going to put that in A. That's really freaking sweet. All right, guys, I've lost my voice, but this is my finalized tier list. Let me know what you guys think about it. If there's something you would have done differently, feel free to let me know down in the comments. What are a couple of your favorite commanders from the set? Specifically, let me know if there are any of these commanders that you are for sure going to build a deck around, because that's my category for S. S is I will build this deck. So let me know what your S tier would be. I'm pretty excited for this set. There's a lot of really exciting stuff going on. Thanks again. Make sure to like, subscribe, share with a friend, all of the good YouTube algorithm stuff. I'll see you guys in a future video. See you later.